Hey everyone, Dr. Alan Miner with Best Practices. We're talking with Josiah Fitzsimmons. He's been in UAC. He was on a master class recently, but he goes in a different direction today. He is so good at looking at the numbers of a clinic. And if you track your data in any way, this is a conversation you have to hear. It's going to change how you look at some of your profitability numbers, your ROI numbers. It's a really good technical podcast for a hardcore operator in chiropractic. And this episode is brought to you by Genesis Back and Neck. They're decompression specialists. If you're looking for another revenue stream inside your clinic, consider partnering with the folks at Genesis Back and Neck. Dr. Chad Glines, Dr. Caleb Broderick founded this company. They're still heavily involved with it. You can Google them at Genesis Back and Neck. Reach out for some information. We've seen upwards of over $1 million of revenue in our clinics from partnering with these guys. Great opportunity. Let's jump into the podcast. Thanks for being with us.
Hey everyone, welcome to the UAC Ultimate Achievers Club Best Practices Podcast. Our hope today is that you get a little nugget from one of our members, something you can learn, maybe you haven't thought of before, that you can implement into either your practice or your life and get really good results right away. I'm here with my co-host, Dr. Alan Miner, who is going to introduce our guest.
Yeah, and we have today somebody who has been UAC a long time. A lot of us have all known Josiah on his come up, if you will, and now he's schooling a lot of us, and that's always fun to watch happen. So Dr. Josiah, his original practice is in Des Moines, Iowa. Wears a lot of other hats now, from Lucro, which is an accounting software bookkeeping program for chiropractors, his clinic. Big real estate investor. If you have a minute, go listen to we recently did a master class with Josiah where we go really in depth in that stuff. But something we haven't talked to you about, Josiah, that I think's a genius of yours. You have a unique gift of looking at numbers in a different way or going a little deeper with different layers than most chiropractors do. And it's around ROI. So let's talk about, and I'll give the context. Where I first heard you and it caught my ear, I was always taught you should get a 3-to-1 ROI on any marketing thing you do. So if you invest $1,000, it's a good thing if you get $3,000 back. And quite frankly, that's been a construct I've used for 20 years. And I heard you going, time out, that is barely looking at the tip of the iceberg. So start us there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's lots of random dogma or someone came up with some idea and it spread like wildfire and everyone's like, yeah, that sounds good. That's easy. I can do that. So I like it. I used to love that show Mythbusters when I was a kid. So we'll try and bust this myth, But yeah,
is the best one not PVA? I mean, I'm still like, what did we do to, what was it? Like, I mean, they're all different, but it was almost like your total number of visits divided by your starts, or I don't know. It was like, what is that even telling you?
Believe me, I've heard 50,000 versions of how to calculate that, but they all want it in the report in Genesis. And it's like, okay, what's your definition of PVA? Okay.
Yeah, that's very true. So my biggest one, is anytime you're spending anything, you want to know that you're getting more than you're spending on it, whether it be a team member, whether it be in marketing, any type of thing you're investing in. Like you said, I invest in lots of real estate as well. And so whether you're putting money in the stock market, whether you're spending time, in a relationship, whether you're spending anything that you do, you always want the value of what you get to be greater than the price that you pay. And price is always just money. It could be time as well. And so that's a huge proposition. That's how I teach all my salespeople. Anytime we're trying to communicate sales, the value of what we're delivering has to be greater than the price. The bigger the delta between value and price, the easier the decision is. And so if you can understand what that delta is or what that individual number, ROI number is for your individual clinic, then you can have much higher confidence, clarity, and certainty with every single one of your decisions, rather than just saying, hey, I should get 3X, or Brian's spending, $1,000 a month on marketing and Alan's doing this, so I'm just going to do what they do. You should be able to make much more clear and confident, personalized decisions based on your own individual numbers. So that's really what it first and foremost starts with, is you have to know your numbers first and foremost. But the ones I'll talk about today are very, very simple. Everyone should know them.
So yeah, let's talk about marketing. Let's just start there. And I know we can apply this to associate doctors too. and
Yeah.
we'll talk about that. But
Yeah, I want
let's
to
just
finish
start.
with the I want to finish with the marital ROI. Because
Be
women,
careful.
we can argue on who's getting more out of this, like
That's awesome.
sorry.
So yeah, let's talk about marketing. So all right, I'm going to do this marketing thing, and it's going to cost me $1,000. Uh, and next month I say, hey, all right, I made 3,000 from that 1,000. That was good. You'd say time out. How would you dissect
I
that a
would
little
say,
deeper?
yeah, I'd say maybe. So the easiest one calculation is you need to know what your profit margin is. And the biggest thing is you need to know your true profit margin. A lot of people know their tax profit margin because they want to pay the least amount of taxes. We're business owners, we're smart. We see everyone says the number one expense in your life is going to be taxes. So how do I get that number as low as possible? Do my kitchen remodel through my practice and my vacations and all these other random things to try and get our taxable income or taxable profit as low as possible. And so if you're making decisions off of that to run your business, that's very poor to begin with. So you want to have that number, like I just talked about, for the one day a year you file taxes, highly, highly valuable to pay the least amount of taxes. I haven't paid taxes in quite a few years. So, but the other 364 days a year, you want to have what is actual true profit margin without all those fringe benefits, tax strategies and so forth that you're trying to implement. What is your actual true profit margin of your business? We find for the most part, most chiropractic clinics have somewhere between, 25 to 50% profit margin, depending on how big they are, how lean they're running and so forth like that. But let's just say it's 33%. Then if you did have a 33% profit margin, you would do, my simple equation is this: 100 divided by the profit margin, 100 divided by 33, that would be a 3x ROI to break even. So your number, Dr. Allen, of 3x ROI that someone told you, if their profit margin was above 33%, then that would be great to get a 3x ROI, because then they would be making money. If their profit margin was 33%, then they would be making no money. They would be breaking even. If their profit margin is 25%, 100 divided by 25, they would need a 4x. So they would be losing money on any investments, and so
Let's just break that down to make it more simple for everybody. So it costs you $1,000. Let's say you have the 25% profit margin in your business. Okay, so that means on $1,000 you make $250.
correct.
So, and I was really excited because I got $3,000 back on my 1,000. So let's say I spent 1,000. Let's say I started one patient for $3,000.
Yeah, so let's say you made a $3,000, and so your profit on that is times 0.25. So you made $750, but you spent 1,000, so you lost $250.
So that is, I think, if chiropractors really pause to understand that, and a lot of them don't. They just say, 1,000 out, 3,000 in, let's go, baby.
Yeah.
Like, in
And
other
you're
words,
saying,
you keep doing that and your profit margin is going to shrink to 25%, right?
Well, it's negative,
Oh,
and
sorry,
that's a negative. Yeah, well, it's gonna get worse and worse. Yeah,
even
if you
worse,
don't
right?
understand. But yeah, like I said, I'll go a little slower so everyone knows this. So $1,000 in ad spend, you make $3,000. On $3,000, you have 25% profit margin. 3,000 times 25%, $750 in profit, but you spent 1,000. 1,000, 750 minus 1,000, is negative $250. So, like I said, if you I can take it to another level. If you know your true profit margin minus your marketing spend, that's actually the most accurate number, because that's, like I said, the marketing spend is we're calculating into this equation, right? So
let's talk about that. Well, first, let's talk about that. But first, how much does that clinic at 25%? Their care plans are $3,000. How many of those do they need to sell to actually get a 3-to-1 ROI on that $1,000 of true profit?
3 to 1 of profit.
Yeah, anybody good at that math? So I'm
Uh,
not. So let's say I sold $12,000. I sold 4 care plans on my $1,000 ad spend.
yeah,
So
so
I have a
$12,000
25% profit
times
margin.
times 0.25, that's going to be $3,000 of
So yeah.
profit on $1,000 of ad spend. So yeah, that would
So
a 3x
so that's
profitability, but you need a 12x, in revenue.
Yeah, and so in 3-to-1 is when we started, guys. That was a made up number. Like, why does that matter? Somebody said that, so we've used it. But when you drill down, if that was really what your goal was 3-to-1, and your care plans are $3,000, and you sell, and you have a 25% profit margin, and you sell 4 care plans for your $1,000 ad, you end up with $3,000 of profit on that 12,000. And so you're going to be happy with your 1-to-3. But a lot of people would say, I made 12 grand on my 1,000. I have a 12-to-1 ROI. This marketing's awesome. And you're the one showing up, Josiah, with the bad news saying, sorry, bro, still good, not quite the rock star you think you are. Now take that to the next level with what you're talking about against your ad spend and your profit margin.
Yeah. So let's say, like I said, your profit margin, is 30%. But let's just say you spend 5%, or let's just make it easy math for ourselves, 10% on marketing. So, your actual profit is 40%. If you don't spend anything on marketing. So 100 divided by 40, would be 2.5. So that would be the break even ROI
Well,
on marketing.
let's say this is $1 million clinic, and they spend 10% of their top line revenue on marketing. So they're spending $100,000 this year on marketing. Now do the calculations from that point.
Okay, yeah. So spend $100,000 on marketing, and they have a 30% profit margin, including paying for marketing. So you add that 100,000 back in, would give you a $40,000 actual profit margin without marketing spend. So then
40%.
they spend $100, so then 100 divided by 40 would still be that 2.5. So if they spend $1,000 on marketing, they need to get $2,500 in gross revenue to break even. Anything above $2,500, on $1,000 in ad spend is going to be profitable. Anything less than that. So whatever they spend on marketing, 100,000 in this example, they need to make more than 250, thousand dollars.
Let's break that down for everybody. If we're at $1 million clinic, 30% profit margin means they make 300,000 on their million, and they have a 10% allocation to their marketing budgets. That's $100,000. How does that translate into that clinic in those scenarios? What do they need to make to justify that 100 grand being a decent ROI in your mind?
Yeah, I mean 2.5x. They don't only need to make $250,000 on $100,000 in spend. So they're making $1 million currently on $100,000 in spend. So they're getting a 10x, overall ROI on overall all marketing strategies. So there might have referrals. There's obviously that's going to be very blended. Just marketing spend compared to revenue, you're getting a very blended number where you're not getting very individualized data. Of you might have gotten $500,000 of that revenue from referrals, or you might have gotten,
Yeah.
a certain amount of revenue
So
from
I guess
other
it
strategies.
helps in this scenario if you have $1 million clinic and you have a 30% profit margin of 300,000. It helps to know that before you decide to do marketing.
Right.
Because that marketing could be almost working against you, or it could be turning your 300,000 into 400,000 of profit. And if you don't know your numbers, you're kind of coming into this sort of just spending marketing because you're told you're supposed to, but not really understanding the impact that's having if it's moving the needle for you or against you on profit.
Yeah, and what I found is if you have good systems, you got good processes, day one, day twos, you have good sign up, and retention rates, with the margins that we have in our profession, most people are far and beyond above that number. And so therefore then if you're above that number, then it's just like, then I call it the marketing vending machine. You put $1 in and you only need $3 back out to break even. If you're getting more than $3 back out, how many dollars should you put in? Unlimited. You should put in unlimited dollars until you can't carry any more dollars. You need more team members to help you carry more dollars, or you need a bigger space to hold all your dollars, or you need more hours to collect the dollars, right? So then it becomes a team and hours or a space issue if you understand the basic math, behind maximizing the capacity that you already have. And so, like I said, that leads into what I call percentage of schedule filled, which I think is the number one stat in the entire profession that nobody tracks, is if you actually know your ROI break-even point, then all you're trying to do is maximize the expenses that you're already paying for. Because if you can see, 100 new patients, let's say at a month, as a hypothetical, and you're only averaging 20 new patients a month, right? Then you have the expenses of a clinic 5 times your revenue. Let's say it's $1 million clinic, it's only 20% filled. Then you potentially have a $5 million clinic, but you're only generating the revenue, of a $1 million clinic. So, whether you have 100% fill scheduled or 20% fill schedule, your payroll doesn't change, your rent doesn't change, your utilities don't change, your internet bill, most all your expenses aren't changing, whether your capacity is maximized or not maximized. You go to a restaurant, whether it's full or empty, they're not paying any less rent, right? And so forth like that.
Yeah.
And that's the exact same thing with your office.
I think
Which
you need a Josiah GPT, and like you need like to give them the prompt.
the
So maybe you
agentic.
should like literally just script the prompt and then ask so that anybody can ask their chat GPT if this marketing strategy is going to give a good ROI or if the ROI.
Here's the thing though that is interesting, Josiah. You hit on how many chiropractors go buy the soft wave machine, the decompression unit, the class 4 laser, trying to fix their problems when you're at 15% of capacity. Like, just why don't you max out what you have before you spend another dollar on the next thing? And that's maybe something I see a lot of UAC is disciplined about is there's so many docs that have 4 different things and they just keep moving on to the next thing.
I'd like to ask that in a different way a little bit because it's like at what point, Josiah, based on the math, let's say you're okay with adding other modalities like a shockwave or something like that, but you're not maxed out. At what point does it make sense to start adding other modalities? In other words, you've built your audience, your network, your customer base, like you're almost at capacity. At what point does it make sense to start to add other products or services to start to generate more profit per customer?
Yeah. I mean, I would say Mythbuster on that one too. I think that's the wrong question.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like they're two different things. It's like, when is the right time to increase the lifetime value of your patients? When is not the right time to increase the lifetime value of your patients? When is not the right time for you to make more money off the same patients you already have? I mean, anytime you would want to do that.
Well, I
So
think
it's
they
more of
say,
a prioritization, if is that going to distract you
right.
from the optimization of your current numbers, and which of those has a higher, opportunity for growth, optimization of current strategies or new strategies, to me is more of the question, and
Well,
my answer is always both.
I just feel like we've seen in UAC, I shouldn't even say UAC, in chiropractic, um, people adding other profit centers, which
Yeah.
in theory sounds great, right? But 3, 4, 5 years later, they're like, and maybe it's a marketing thing, they're spending money on the marketing, right? But overall, they're not more profitable, right? They've got, maybe it's just distraction. Maybe it's, where do you see people going wrong? I mean, there's also plenty of practices that do well when they add other
Yeah.
profit centers. Where's
No,
the
I
common
I
mistake?
I think the biggest thing is they're, building on a sand, just like in the Bible says, building on a solid foundation. They're trying to build the second story before they finish the first story. They haven't solidified, the whole process. And I know we just talked briefly before we hit record here today, is what I think the number one missing piece in the entire profession is structure. And we don't have the structural framework of clinics to scale to the next level. We're barely, getting the foundation laid, and then we're trying to install the roof, when the concrete of the basement's not even dry yet, and then we're frustrated that they both are failing. And so I think fundamentally it's a structural issue that when you implement a process, a protocol, or a procedure, that you have the data and the backing and the systems for that to continue to run, whether you want to build, an addition on, at that point. So I think it's more of a stabilization of you understanding what you're doing and what's working. Again, going back, if you understand your numbers and your chiropractic is crushing it, and your break even point, and your ROI numbers, your profit margins, and exactly what's working, then it's going to be a lot easier to bolt something on versus you just feel like you're throwing money, and you're getting some X return that you don't really understand. Bolting something on, is just another thing, versus a very solid, foundation that you're building on top of.
Josiah, I keep building a drum. I just asked this because you see inside a lot of practices with your bookkeeping, and you guys are starting to quantify best practices and get some data that shows baselines across the industry inside of Lucro. My big thing, I had a call today with a doc who's still at $32, $33 a visit average. I was always taught the chiropractic adjustment should stay pace with the price of a stamp. Stamps are 78 cents. An adjustment should be $78. That kind of helps you keep in alignment with inflation. And when we're on the call with people with
You're
about
running your
associate
whole you're
docs
running your
or,
whole practice off of these crazy things.
that's a good one though, because I'll tell you what, how many chiros are still at 30, 40, $50 a visit? And then we're
Yeah.
on the phone
I
and they
like how
can't,
I'm better.
they do 4 or 500,000. They can't afford an associate. And you find out they're charging $32. Well, if you were just charging $78 a visit, staying up with inflation,
Yeah.
you'd double the revenue and be able to hire an associate, no problem. And so I'm just curious around the conversation of average cost per visit. What's the number you're seeing across the profession right now? What do you strive for in your clinic?
Yeah, I mean, pricing is that's a big one. We don't have that specific pricing data right now because we don't have EHR connection. So we just have total, revenue data. So I can't give
Uh,
you the specifics of that. Hopefully one day I'll have that. But I 100% agree with you. I mean, that's such an easy, low-hanging fruit for people to scale is, increasing pricing. And Jesus and chiropractors, we're the top miracle workers in the history of the world. There's no doubt about the value and the lives that we should change. Who more often gets called a miracle worker, than a chiropractor? You've seen the funny memes of, someone got a 4-star reviews and it said, Dr. Allen saved my life, and he still got 4 stars, and it's like, what else can we do to change people's lives on a regular basis and not get more credit, for what we're doing, to impact people. And so there's no doubt in the value and the impact that we have, and obviously the price that should be charged for that value. I have a great friend of mine locally that owns a insurance company that actually fight claims against insurance companies to lower bills for patients. And I'll let you guys have an estimate. What do you guys think is the highest price that they've ever seen for a bandage?
For a bandage?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to say $100 at a hospital.
$350. It's my number.
$1,200.
Wow.
For a bandage.
They
Yeah.
keep track. They think that should be the lowest price thing, and they've seen that as high on a bill as $1,200 that they're fighting these hospitals and insurance on for pricing. And so, if they're selling band-aids and bandages for $1,200, how much is the value of an adjustment that restores the nervous system and the life and power within somebody's body? So, I think you're totally right on increasing prices. Overall pricing of what we deliver, the value that what we have is so great. The biggest thing from a tangible takeaway, it's like, okay, where should I go from here? Should I increase my price to the price of a stamp? Yeah, I think that's awesome. I like that, as a core concept, but from a really tangible takeaway, again, going back to your numbers, is if you understand your profit margin, like I said, let's just say you're charging $50 a visit, currently right now, and you're at 30% profit margin, that means you're making $15 on every $50 adjustment, 30% of 50 being 15. And so if you increase your prices to $65, if you increase your prices by your profit margin, then you're literally doubling the profitability of your entire business. So increase your prices by your profit margin, doubles the profit of your clinic. And that is like a hallmark that I've taught a lot of people. Like, if you're at $50, and you have 20%, all you got to do is go to $60 and you literally double the profitability of your entire business, with a $10 increase in
That's pretty good.
pricing. And so it's like, that's unbelievable because it doesn't cost any more to deliver a $65 or $100 adjustment than it does to deliver a $22.50 adjustment, right? The same cost to deliver
Right.
those two services. So when you really understand that, then you can really understand the power of running a service-based business.
A lot of great stuff, Josiah, but that was probably the nugget of it all. So
Yeah, thanks.
on that note, man,
We really buried that one. Yeah.
always love chatting with you, Josiah. Thank you, brother,
Thanks, brother.
and
See you
good
soon.
work, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Oh, wait, we got one more question, Alan.
Oh yeah, we forgot UAC. Why you in it? What's been the benefit, Josiah?
Yeah, no, I mean, honestly, just hanging out with big thinkers, for me is, I learned on a few years into my career that really the number one capital that I'm going to have is relationship capital. And that's not something I learned early on. Grew up low income, family didn't have a lot of, connections with other people. And not until I started hanging out with big thinkers and people that are trying to stretch the envelope and get to the next level do you realize the value, not only, for your own mindset, but also, to have connections when you do have a question, that you may have to spend thousands of dollars or hours and hours of reading books and research when I could just pick up the phone, or go to an event and talk to someone who's, not just talked about it, but actually done it. And so relationship capital is by far and away what I think is the answer to that question, surrounding yourself with those people, and the tide, rising all boats.
Awesome. Good work,
Thank you, brother.
Josiah. Appreciate you, brother.
Yeah,
See
thank
you
you.
soon, bro.